prospect of listening to a couple of political speeches and a debate just thrills me all. I can see that. It's true, just looking out over the crowd. That's always been true, especially when one has had a chance to listen to politicians in the past. There's a story of the lieutenant governor who heard about the guy that was sentenced to hang, and the rumor was, this was back in the day when South Dakota hung horse thieves, and word had it that there would be thousands of people at the square, so the lieutenant governor thought, well, I better be there also. And as is customary, when they led the condemned man to the scaffold and asked him, do you have any last words? And the guy thought a minute, and he said, well, no, I guess not. And the lieutenant governor piped up and said, well, do you mind if I say a few words then? And the man said, no, but hang me first. So I'm hoping you have a little better attitude about that tonight. I want to begin, as Scott did, by telling you a little bit about myself. I grew up on a farm about 25 miles from here. My grandparents came from Denmark in 1911, bought a little quarter-section farm. My dad was born there 3 years later on the farm. He grew up there. And then when he married my mom, my two sisters and I grew up on the farm. When we were growing up, we still had an active farm. We had a diversified farm back in the 50s and early 60s. We had cattle, we had hogs, we had chickens, raised corn, hay, and oats. We even had a small dairy herd at one point when I was in the later part of my grade school years and part of high school. So I knew what it was like growing up on the farm. And Scott talked about the veterinarians in his life, and I knew Dr. Edinburgh from Del Rapids was our veterinarian. He came out when we had a calf that we couldn't pull ourselves or we had some trouble with the herd. He would help us. I went to a one-room country school. I was the only kid in my class, or as I like to say, I was at the top of my class. When I was at the end of my 7th grade, the country school closed, and I was then consolidated with the rest of my school into the Del Rapids School District. Started riding the bus to Del Rapids. That's where I met my wife, Linda. And this is a good segue to introduce Linda. She came in late. She was working at the fair today. Linda, would you stand? And also my son, Chris, is here. Chris, would you stand? Linda and I dated through high school. When I was a senior in high school, we had some financial problems on the farm, and we had to auction the livestock and equipment, and that was hard on my parents in those days. But they did what they had to, and my parents, some of you know, were deaf. They were born deaf, and so they started working in Sioux Falls. They'd make the 50-mile round trip from the farm to work as janitors at Augustana College. That happened about the time I was entering college, so I was on my own. I worked my way through USD, washing dishes in a sorority house for my meals, running errands for the government department, and then doing labor jobs in the summer. I was a welder on the Lode King assembly line in Elk Point, and I welded and painted water towers for McGuire Iron. I graduated from high school and then attended USD, where I worked my way through school, as I mentioned. And then after college, I went to law school in Chicago. For 3 years, I worked my way through law school. I drove bus. I got a commercial bus driver's license and drove bus from about 4 in the afternoon until midnight. And then on weekends, I was a security guard in an office building downtown. Between that and running errands and doing legal research for a law firm, I worked my way through law school. After school and working in Chicago just a short time, I moved back to South Dakota, married Linda. After a couple of years, we had a baby daughter. And then we bought the building site from my parents on the farm. We bought the 7 acres back on the farm, and then we moved in with my parents into the old farmhouse. And I was working at a bank in those days, and I would commute back and forth to the bank. And then we built our own house. We hired somebody to dig a basement across the yard from the old farmhouse. Someone else poured the foundation. And then we built the house ourselves. I'd work at the bank all day and then come home at night and work on the house. And from May till the following March, we'd do that, and we got the house to the point where we could move across the yard into our own place. Of course, it was hard to get Linda to leave her mother-in-law after that many years. But we moved across, and then we had another daughter, and And then a couple of years later, we had our son Chris, and the three kids grew up with their grandparents, my parents, right across the yard, and my parents lived the rest of their lives in the old farmhouse. On the career side of things, I worked in banking for about 10 years. And while I was there, I started volunteering at a place called Children's Home Society, which some of you may know serves abused and neglected children around this state. And I worked there for nearly 20 years and really grew to love their mission and felt it was an important thing for our state. And it's one thing that I look back on my life and feel good about. While I was there, I was recruited to run for the state legislature. I did that. I ran for the state senate and was elected in 1996. And when I got to Pierre, Mike Rounds was already a state senator. That's how I met him. We served together for 2 terms, a total of 4 years. And then in the year 2000, Mike was forced out of the Senate by term limits. I'd only been there 4 years, so I served still 2 more, another term. And then in 2002, when Governor Rounds won the nomination to run for governor, he asked me to be his running mate. So we ran and were elected in 2002 and re-elected in 2006. And so this is my 8th year as lieutenant governor. And of course, Governor Rounds cannot run again because of term limits, and so I hope to succeed him. And the question you should ask yourself, and I'll ask it for you, is why should you choose Dennis Dugard above the other candidates? In this case, other candidate now. I'm used to the primary, I guess. Well, first thing, I think is experience. I have, after 6 years in the Senate and 8 years as Lieutenant Governor, I have political experience, so I understand how things work in Pierre. I think that's helpful, and Scott has that as well. But I also have executive experience. I have led an organization, a large organization, Children's Home Society, when I first became associated with it, was not doing very well. They had lost money for 2 years in a row. They owed banks, a couple of banks, a significant amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Their vehicles were in disrepair. Their facilities were overcrowded. And when I came onto the board, the first thing we did was hire a new executive director. I went on the finance committee and became the finance chair. We started having monthly budget meetings, and we got the budget back in the black, started paying down our debt, and over the years we paid off that debt. And also one thing that had been happening is Children's Home Society, instead of addressing its problems, had spent its reserves down from $1.5 million down to about $650,000. And after we got our financial house in order, we set about reversing that and growing the organization. In the years I was there, Children's Home Society grew 7-fold. And I know George Twitterow and Sherry Twitterow, who were great supporters of the Black Hills Children's Home, and some others of you may be familiar with Children's Home. They'll know that Children's Home grew significantly over the last 20 years. And it wasn't all me, but I was leading it, and I had a great team. And over the years, not only did we grow Children's Home Society, but we got it completely out of debt, and we grew that endowment and reserve fund from that $650,000 to which it had fallen to when I left Children's Home last November to focus on this race to $32 million. And they don't have any operating debt. They don't even have a mortgage. So I like to point that out because, of course, South Dakota faces some economic difficulties, some budget challenges, and despite what some may portray me as, I don't disagree with the nature of that challenge. I disagree with whether we should call it a 5-alarm fire or a 4-alarm fire. I think rather we should focus on solving the problem. So I believe that if you look at my experience, my leadership experience as an executive and also on the political side, and then also consider why I'm running. I'm not running because I am looking for money or power. If I was excited by that, if that was an attraction to me, I would have never left the bank. I would have never left the field of law. You go to work for a children's charity for 20 years, you don't get rich and powerful that way. But I do enjoy public service. I like helping people. At Children's Home Society, I saw a need that I thought I could fill, and I did. I do believe that I know I made an impact on that organization. So That's why I'm